Welcome everyone, and thanks for making the time to be here. I'm at the Arts Tasmania office this evening with Kunani behind us and looking out over Timtimali Mananya, the River Derwent. And in recognition of the deep history and culture of this land, we'd like to acknowledge and pay our respects to all Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the past and present custodians of the lands upon which we meet, and welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us tonight. Also with us tonight in the background from Arts Tasmania is my colleague Kate Mackey, who's our Acting Director at Arts Tasmania. And we have two fantastic artists with us to talk through the practical aspects of making wall-based artworks or murals in relation to our public art scheme, the Tasmanian Art Site Scheme. And they are Beck Adamczewski and Amanda Kay, and they've both completed several commissions through our scheme. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Beck Adamczewski. So Beck is a creative based in Nipaluna, Hobart. She's drawn to the spaces where art and design collide, traditional and digital mediums creating stories for both physical and digital spaces. Beck loves to create for communities. Her mural work is inspired by her home state of Lutruwita, Tasmania, the plants, animals and wild places. And her work explores our shared sense of place through living and built environments. So I'll stop sharing my screen and Beck, you can jump in and share your presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alicia. Okay. Is that showing up all right for everyone?
That looks good.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and hello to everybody. Welcome and thanks for coming along tonight. So first I'd like to pay my respect as well and acknowledge all Tasmanian Aboriginal people, the past and present custodians of the land from which I'm presenting tonight, and that sovereignty was never ceded. I've been really fortunate to complete several commissions for Arts Tasmania, plus I've worked on multiple private commissions and large-scale artworks for other organisations around Tasmania and councils. My main role for the last 17 years or so has actually been as an illustrator and graphic designer, and I started painting large-scale works about 4 years ago. My arts practice explores themes about Tasmania's unique wild places, our native flora and fauna, and this idea of bringing nature back to urban environments. So tonight I just wanted to share a few tips and tricks that I've gathered from my experience painting murals and hopefully demystify what's actually a really fun and satisfying creative passion. I'm going to share this from my perspective. There's lots of other ideas out there of different materials you can use, but I'll mainly be sharing it with the materials that I use. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how to get started painting at large scale. Some people here tonight will have painted before, some people won't have, some people might have done a few scaled up things, and so you might be coming from different perspectives. So one of the first things that I would suggest if you want to try upscaling your work and practicing at large scale is to grab yourself a piece of MDF. It's relatively cheap. It's something that you can work on vertically to get used to having how the paint might move a little bit differently from what you're used to. And you can also refine your style. So practicing on a piece of MDF, you can get a feel for what's going to work if it's a little bit less detailed or more detailed when you're standing back and getting a feel for how your style of artwork translates up big. The other thing that's great about a bit of MDF is you can take a photo of it, you can paint over it and take another photo of it, and then you've got several large-scale artworks that you can share as part of your portfolio when you're applying for different commissions. Something else that you could do would be to paint a wall in your home or someone else's. I had a bit of a quiet couple of months a couple of years ago and decided to paint a wall at my house, and the photo in the background here is at my place. So it's a really fun way as well of working with an actual realistic space. Another thing that you could do would be going to a paint jam. So I'm going to talk mainly about brushwork, but there might be people here tonight who are going to use spray paint. something that happens in Hobart and maybe other places around that you can try is going to somewhere like a paint jam. So Vibrance Projects runs one in Bidencopes Lane in the city. And what's really great about going to something like that is you get a feel for working outside at scale. And there's a great community as well that you can have a chat with people who are around, who have been painting for a while, and get some tips and tricks from them. So upscaling your work. There's a few different ways that you can have a play around with to upscale your work. I tend to use a freehand approach where I'll just draw my artwork and my concepts straight onto a wall. You could also pair that with a standard grid. So there's a little photo there of me on the right-hand side, and you can sort of see I've got about 10 centimetres by 10 centimetres of a grid that I've overlaid on my work. And then when I go to the wall, I can draw up, a metre by a metre and help upscale my work that way. So I have a reference point when I get to the wall. I've got a photo there from Jamin, who's an amazing Tasmanian artist, and I really recommend you go and check out his work. This was a work that he did up north in Launceston. And what he's got in the background there is something called a doodle grid. Sometimes it's called the Roan method. And the idea there is you might put on your base colour, you do some doodles in the background that might be noughts and crosses, it could be letters, it could be anything, just so you get different reference points. What you do is you take a photo of that background, overlay your artwork with a transparency on top, and then when you go to upscale your work onto the wall, you have some more reference points. So there's some great tutorials out there. I'd recommend checking that out as well. Something else you can do is your projector. A couple of issues with the projector that you might want to practice and consider is, will you have power access to your site? What's the throw of your projector? So that just means how close does your projector or far away does your projector need to be to get the scale that you're going for with your concept art? And will you have that distance where you're working? Short throw projectors are a lot more expensive as well, so that's something to factor in. You also might need to think about what might be in the way. So if you're projecting and there's a tree in the way, is that going to interrupt how you'll get your design onto the wall? You might also want to think about the wall flatness. Are you going projecting onto a flat wall? Is it a curved wall? Is that going to skew your artwork? Something else that's really important is, do you have access to that wall at nighttime? Because obviously to use your projection, you want it to be dark. And I've got a little funny photo there in the top, which is me attempting to get my projector lined up, where I've got like a paintbrush and a hummus lid, and it's precariously balanced on a chair. So it can be a really great way to upscale your work. It can sometimes be a little bit fiddly. So just have a practice at that before you get to your wall. And the other way you could upscale your work would be stencils. So that might be printing out your work onto some large pieces of paper and cutting them out so that you can get your work how you want it to be. Now, when I'm actually applying my design to the wall, I tend to use chalk or paint markers. But if you're a spray painter, you can also use spray paint to get your design onto the wall. I really like chalk because I can rub it out if I've done something wrong, or if I change my paint line slightly when I get to the wall. I'm not having to go back in onto my background with the same colour and tidy it up. But obviously that depends. Maybe, if you're working outside and there might be rain and you're working over several days, you don't want to spend all that time putting your design onto the wall and then it get washed off halfway through. So I found paint markers like Posca's can be really good, and that's shown on the right-hand side there. But I'd really recommend not using Sharpies or any alcohol-based markers. They're going to bleed through your paint and it'll just take longer to make sure that they're covered up effectively. So some of the materials and equipment that I use when I'm painting. There's lots of great paints out there. I tend to use Dulux Weather Shield Low Sheen. I really like using that particular paint. It goes on really nicely. It's got a great range of colours. Hames is also really good. But the recommendation I would have there is to get yourself a trade account. So both Dulux and Hames, certainly in Hobart, have trade locations. And if you have a trade account, you actually get a bit of a discount. So you're paying less for your paint than you would if you went somewhere like Bunnings. If you're getting spray paint, you can get spray paint through Vibrance Paint Shop. And again, spray paint's not my area, but if you have a chat with Johnny at Vibrance, he's incredibly knowledgeable and just a really lovely person. So pop in there and support a local business. I'd also suggest thinking about the paint base. So I've got a picture there you can kind of see in the lower right-hand corner where it's looking a little bit sad and honestly a little bit creepy. So you really need to think about how many layers of paint that you will need for the particular colours that you're using. If you've got something that has a white base, it's going to cover pretty well. Minimum I would do would be at least 2 coats, because you want to have a really nice coverage and longevity to your paint. But if you've got some of those colours that have a bright base, so that's kind of your darker colours that don't have any white in them, you might need to do up to like 4 layers. So that's something to consider with not just the colours that you pick, but also when you're quoting and you're thinking about how long something's going to take you to do. If you do a background that's like a bright yellow, you'll need a lot more coverage, a lot more time, and just, it's not to don't do it, it's just something to think about when you're painting. I also want to chuck in there that not to use sample pots. The reason that is most of the paint producers don't put high quality paint in their sample pots. So it's really just about colour testing. But if you want longevity for your artwork and you want it to look really good for a long time, it's just not weather tested. It's not guaranteed to keep the colour for that really long time that you want your artwork to be looking beautiful. Brushes, I really love the Monarch brushes. There's heaps of brushes out there though, so I particularly like the Rat Tail, Bevel Liners and the Sample Pot brushes by Monarch. And they also do rollers, and I love a mini roller. They're really handy, particularly if you're working with a textured surface like a brick wall. I do have an image of me there holding a paint gun. This was something that I recently used, and it was for a technique because I was wanting to get a gradient, and it was really fun. But you do have to consider with things like a paint gun, again, your power. Do you have power? If you're using batteries, they don't last that long, so we have to change them over as you're working. The container that attaches to your paint gun only holds between sort of 600 and 800 milliliters. So how long is that going to last you? How much extra work are you going to need to be continuing to top that up? And there's quite a lot of prep time and washing up. So again, not to not use it, but just so you have a little bit more information about what's involved when you use a paint gun. Something else that's really handy to have a step stool or work platforms and ladders. You can also get things called a mobile scaff. So that's a picture of me on the right on a mobile scaff, which pack down really nicely, and you can generally fit something like that in a ute, or even a scissor lift if you're working up higher than that. And you can hire things like the mobile scaffolds and the scissor lifts from a plant hire. Something else I wanted to mention here is when you're starting out on this journey, it might be really good to think about how high you're willing to go. How do you feel about heights and working at heights? You know, are you okay on a step stool? How do you feel about standing on top of a ladder for multiple hours? How do you feel about going on a scissor lift? People feel differently about heights, and it's probably, you know, a good thing just to consider what types of commissions you are looking at doing and how high you're comfortable working. Here's a long list of some extra things and a hilarious photo my friend Angie took of me in my fun get up. So I really would recommend having hat and sunscreen all year round in Tassie. You really want to look after yourself and have that health and safety. High-vis vest is fantastic, not only because of safety, but also if you're wearing a high-vis vest, many less people are going to ask you if you're allowed to be painting the wall that you're painting. It's amazing how many people will stop and just check that you're allowed to do what you're doing. Your drop cloths, I really love the fabric drop cloths because if any paint falls on them, it actually soaks in rather than something that's plastic and then the paint won't dry and might move around on your feet, creating more mess. I love a paint key or a multi-tool. I've got a picture of a multi-tool up there. It's just great for opening your cans. You can see there it's got a little curved edge. That's really great for scraping any extra materials out of a roller, because obviously we want as little as possible going down drains or, you know, being lost because it's expensive stuff, paint. So you want to make sure you're saving that as much as possible. Your bollards and caution tape just to make a safe area, rags, buckets. I save all of my big yogurt buckets. I don't know if anyone out there has the, you know, the big Yolana yogurt buckets or your hummus buckets. They're really handy for putting your brushes in, putting paint into, so you're not having to hold paint tins which are really heavy and you don't want them to fall over and lose your paint. So they're fantastic. You can buy things, but you know, if you can reuse something, that's even better. Another thing I like to reuse is my soft plastics, but you can also just use cling wrap. I use this for brushes that I'm still using the colour, but I don't want to wash out the brush, because obviously the more you wash out the brush, the more product you're getting rid of, the longer it takes, because you're having to do more cleaning up as you're going. So I'll tend to wrap my brushes up and wrap my rollers up until I'm ready to use that colour again. Methylated spirits, that's a really handy thing to have in your kit in case there's any spills or you need to clean something up. Having your chalk or paint pens for if you need to redraw on your design. A mallet for closing your paint lids. I'm a little bit of a gremlin and I actually just tread on mine, but I definitely recommend having a mallet. It's probably a much better way of doing it. It's really great to still have your concept art. So whether you've printed that out or whether you have it on your phone or whatever, just having that in case you need to do any touch-ups. Milk crates are really handy for carrying paint around, but don't stand on them. They're really not stable. So I feel like I can't sort of say milk crates and then have them and stand on them, because they're quite dangerous and people have been known to their foot go through them. So please be very careful. It's really, I'm just recommending for putting your paint in and carrying it to site or carrying it around your site. Gloves and spray and mask if you're doing spray paint. Water is really handy. You're not always near a water source, so making sure you take some water with you for any cleanup, and also obviously staying hydrated while you're working. And snacks. I mean, snacks are very important, so you need to make sure that you're feeling good as you're working. So thinking about your surface that you're working on, your wall prep and your coatings. I wanted to show this photo in the background, which was a job I did for She Shreds. And it's on a roller door, which actually is about twice the surface area that you might think it is. So why that's important is not only is it the extra time it takes to paint twice the surface area, but also your materials. So when you're quoting up, when you're thinking about how long a job's going to take you, how much materials you need to think about the surface area as well, in terms of all of the bits of the surface and also how fiddly it is. So this was another job on the right there, one that I did that was on weatherboard. And so the other thing there is, when you're getting your lines in, you're just having to spend more time to make sure it's looking good. So factoring that into your time frame. When you're thinking about your surface as well and your site, you're thinking about whether it's indoor and whether it's outdoor, what your access is like. So that's not just access in terms of how tall the wall is and whether you need a step stool or you need a ladder. It might be also how far away can you park your car to get your materials on site. Paint's quite heavy, so do you need to get yourself like a wheelie duver to get your paint to site, or are you able to carry it? Is the ground beneath where you're painting level, or is it at a slight angle? And that might impact on what kinds of ladders that you can use. So thinking about all those things as well. The minimum prep that I would do for a wall would be to sugar soap it. And depending on the site that you're working, particularly if it's a school or something like that, they may have a pressure hose on site that they can pressure wash the wall for you. So check in with people there about what might be possible. And then I'll tend to prime it. And of course, it depends on the job. Some jobs, the wall surface will already be primed. Some you need to consider how you're going to prime it. I like to use the Dulux one-step prep water-based, and I tint it to the darker shade, which is 2 levels of grey. And I've got that on the left-hand side there to show you the colour grade is. And the reason I like that is because I work with a lot of bright colours. It really just helps those colours pop, cuts down on my time of how many coats of paint that I need to do, and it's just a really nice surface to work with. So I want to talk a little bit about the different coatings that you can use. There's 2 kinds, which is a sacrificial and a non-sacrificial coating. Your sacrificial coating tends to be one that's a bit cheaper, one that you can put on yourself. And what happens is you put your coating on, and if heaven forbid someone tags it, someone can come along and pressure hose it or wash it off, and it will take the tag, but it will also take some of the coating with it. So over time that does degrade the coating, but keeps your artwork nice and protected. But over time you may need to put that coating back on. Then you have a non-sacrificial coating, and this tends to be what's called a two-pack product. A two-pack product is you kind of have your base and then you add a hardener to it. And within a certain time frame, usually 1 to 2 hours, that will turn into a solid plastic film over your artwork. So if you're going to use a non-sacrificial coating, I'd really recommend hiring a professional painter, because they're quite tricky to work with. You can do it yourself, but just, professional painters and subcontracting to someone who knows what they're doing and can work within a certain time frame can be a really advantageous thing to do. The coatings that I really like, the Surface Shield FP for my outdoor work. But I just did want to mention this artwork in the picture is one that I did for the Royal Hobart Hospital with Arts Tasmania, and that has a coating called Sterigard, which is one that can withstand some abrasive cleaners, and it's suitable for a hospital environment. So you've got a few options out there. That one I was able to just put on as brushwork just over the pieces of the art rather than doing the full wall. But you've got a few options out there. And this is the other thing that I think is really good about setting up a trade account at Dulux or Hames or somewhere like that, is there's fantastic people there who know their products and can talk you through all of the steps to either doing that yourself or if you need to hire a professional painter. So some of the fun things and not so fun things about working outside, you're kind of in the elements when you're outside. And as I've already mentioned, really important to make sure you're protected with your hat, your sunscreen, long sleeves for sun. You can actually get quite hot working, and particularly if you've got any sun bouncing off the wall and you're working for many hours. So please do look after yourself in the sun. Rain is something else. I've got the picture in the background here where I dared the rain gods, the weather gods, and I lost. So I would recommend keeping an eye on the weather. And touch dry isn't always dry enough for the rain. Sometimes that will still lift paint, and you kind of need to balance out getting your job done, but also not making more work for yourself by having the paint run and having to fix it later. Something else that's really tricky when you're painting, particularly if you're spray painting, from what I understand, is the wind. It's almost impossible to spray paint easily in the wind, but that's the same for brushwork as well. If it's really windy, the wind will take your paint off your brush and end up with splatters. But the thing that's also really hard is if you've got wet paint, it'll blow insects and dust and leaves and all sorts of stuff into your work. So again, just balancing with getting your work done, but also knowing that you're outside and there will be these elements. The cold can be tricky to work in, but why I've had that there in the list is that your paint won't cure very well under about 8 degrees. So I tend to only work 10 degrees plus so that I actually get a really nice finish on my paint and it's not kind of going sticky and strange and not drying properly. Insects, for some reason, insects seem to love walking through your paint. So as you're working, you may need to redirect some insects, particularly ants and flies just love to land in it. So that's another joy of working outside. People, this is something that I actually really, really love about working in public and working outside, is the interactions you have with people, particularly in primary schools. It's just the best. Like kids coming past saying they love the colours you're using or love what you're doing and getting really inspired. It's a really special thing about doing this kind of work. Height's something, as I've already mentioned, just having a think about working up high and what you feel comfortable with. Sometimes it can just be really nice being up high as well, because once you're up high and, people can kind of wave at you, but they can't engage you in conversation. So you can sort of keep going with what you're doing. So, yeah, that's a very individual thing. I want to talk a little bit about presenting your ideas. So I've got a mock-up here in the background. This is of a recent job that I did for Arts Tas in the underpass at Cornelian Bay. I'm going to do a case study of this at the end, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about presenting to panels that not everybody on the panel will be from an arts background. And so I think it's really valuable to be able to share your ideas in a way that people who maybe don't think visually can then understand your work. So I've got 2 examples there where I've kind of got, my mock-up and then the finished work. And you see there's a bit of a difference between, the mock-up and the finished work, but it just helps kind of share your idea. So it's really good to be able to talk about your ideas in the way that you're writing about your concepts, but to be able to show it can be really helpful for some people to be able to see and imagine what you're going to do. because, as I said, my background is graphic design and illustration, I use the Adobe software, but you don't have to have the Adobe software to be able to do some mock-ups. So I've just got a list there of some other options, and you can just do sort of a simple visual demonstration of what your idea is going to look like. I want to talk a little bit about documenting and your portfolio. So I think it's really great to take photos throughout the process, and particularly, like I was saying, with practicing on MDF or on a wall, being able to show the steps and actually show some finished work that is a larger scale will really, really help with your portfolio. And when I share images of my portfolio, I'll tend to lay it out on a page with a few simple bits of information about the project. So this is the Jack Jumper Clinic at the Royal Hobart Hospital. And because there was multiple parts to this work, it just means I'm sharing one image, but I'm sharing sort of several parts of that work. So it gives an overview of the story that I was telling throughout the entire work. I've got the name and the date and a little bit, size information, other things like that, just kind of to help show my portfolio off. And it may also be that if you have a large work, you might want to share a photo of the full work, but then you might have some details that you're showing as well. So I want to talk just a little bit about the insurance that I use, and then other insurances out there, so I'll just talk about it from my perspective. So you will need insurance, both for yourself and if you have any assistance. I use NAVA insurance, which is a heavily discounted insurance for artists specifically. And I found them to be really helpful, and they've got a great website with lots of information on there. You need to factor in the insurance for yourself, but also there may be an ongoing need for insurance. So do check your contract. Some contracts require a certain amount of years of you having that insurance. So that's your public liability insurance. So just have a talk with your ArtsTas public arts officer about that, or reading their contract. And also with the NAVA insurance, they have recently changed the rules. So you can work still over 5 metres, but it's tested on a case-by-case basis. So if you do happen to be working over 5 metres in height, you just need to have a chat with NAVA about that and see if there's any other information they need or other requirements. So I just thought I'd talk through one of my projects. This is the one that was at Cornelian Bay that finished earlier this year. So these are a few pages from my presentation. Now, in this particular project, it was an application which was writing about my previous work and writing about my arts practice and showing examples of my work. And then it went to a shortlisting process. So this is the presentation that I gave in the shortlisting part of the job. So I have a page about my concept where I'm writing about the key themes in my concept and some sentences and paragraphs about it. I show the full artwork. I create all of my artwork generally in Illustrator, and so I've kind of got vectorized elements where I might point to different things and say how big it is and all of those parts to that job. And then, as you can see, I was talking about before, having your mock-ups. So those are a couple of mock-ups that I've done where I've just overlaid my concept work on photos that I've taken on site. My next few pages, I've got proposed timeline where I'm talking through the different stages of the project and when I expect them to be. I've got some information about the materials that I'm using and links to those as well, and then talking about how I'm going to install it. So that just means I'm saying I will be on site, I will paint this by hand with brushes, and if I'll have an assistant or what will be happening there. Got another page about my colours, which have some colour chips, which can be really helpful. And I would also suggest when you're designing and you're designing to be working with paint, it's probably really helpful to go and actually see what paints are available, because there are some ranges of colours that aren't that great. So orange in particular is sort of hard to get a lot of great oranges. So that's probably a thing to have a think about before you do, a beautiful orange artwork that has lots of different oranges. Maybe just go and check out what's available. Can be really helpful. And also because when you start mixing paints, particularly if you're mixing paints with different bases, they may not then be, they may not stand up to UV light and other things like that. So it's just something, if you can get some paints that are close to what you want to use, that'll give you a great result. I've also got my indicative budget there. I'll go into budgetary sort of things that you might need to think about in another slide. But yeah, I'm quite happy sort of to talk through that more if anyone wants to ask. So the next stage after that was all approved, and I did something called a detailed design package, where I go through and I, sort of have all the details so that everyone knows what I'm going to be painting and the materials I'm going to be using. And you also do some work clearance certificates and a risk assessment to make sure that you'll be working safely and that you're okay to go and start work. I got to site and started painting on my background. We've got a stage where I've got some chalk lines, painting in kind of, my first layer of paint and some details. And this feels very fast because at the time it took a long time to paint, but then I finished. Success. So this was a really fun project, and it was a wonderful space to work in. It's really nice to walk through there now. Before it was very grey and drab and a little bit scary, and now it's kind of welcoming and lots of bright colours, and I've had some really fantastic feedback. So I really, really loved working on that project. So some of the things that you might need to consider when you're thinking about your budget and you're thinking about how you'll actually make the size of wall work for the budget that you have. So you need to think about your design fee. So that's your concept work and artwork fee. Any documentation that you need to do. So that's your detailed design package, your work clearance form. There's maintenance documents that you'll need to do at the end just to say how to upkeep the mural work, and your risk assessments as well. Depending on the job, you may have wall preparation. So that will be thinking about the surface, your site access, the materials it will take to prepare the wall, and your time to prepare it. Or if you're subcontracting to a professional painter, which you can also do if you're not wanting to do the wall prep time, you can factor that in as well. Your project management time, that'll be your meetings, emails, phone calls, planning, site visits, things like that. Your travel and incidentals. So my understanding is quite a few of these schools are in different places around the state. They might not be where you happen to live. So you do want to factor in any travelling that you'll need to do if you need to stay overnight, things like that, into your budget, and your incidentals, because everybody said, as I said before, everyone needs snacks and to stay hydrated. Your painting times. This might be with or without an assistant. This is really rough, but somewhere usually between about $150 to $300 per square metre, which really depends on so many things. It depends on your surface, depends on your style. You might be quite detailed in the way that you work, or you might do quite large shapes and flat lay. So that really depends on those, and also the access. You do need to think about your price square metre when you're painting. If you're climbing up and down a mobile scaff, that's going to take you longer than if you're just able to do it all at standing height. You're thinking about your materials and equipment. So that's your paint, drop cloths, ladders, safety equipment like bollards, things like that. Even though I already have things like ladders and safety equipment, it's something that you also have to think about the upkeep of. So it's really important, even each job, that you're factoring in the upkeep of all of that equipment as well. And your coating. So again, are you subcontracting? Are you doing it yourself? What are the material costs? What's the time cost? Your insurance costs. So as I mentioned before, you may have ongoing insurance costs. So you need to factor in, if you need several years of insurance after you've finished a job, how much is that going to impact on your budget? And also if you need an assistant. I've also just chucked in there your Working with Vulnerable People card. It's fantastic to get that. And I would suggest if you're looking at applying for any commissions, just to get onto that sooner rather than later. It can take a little bit of time for, the police checks and other things. And it does have a bit of a cost involved as well. So that's why I've popped it in the budgeting considerations. And then finally, you've got your contingency. So that's normally about 5% of your whole budget. And it's just for anything little that might go wrong. So that's me. Thank you so much for listening. I did also want to say to not be discouraged. It took me, I think, about 8 applications before I was commissioned, but it's a really valuable thing both to work with your own arts practice and also a way of brightening up and sharing art with a really vast array of people. So it's really fun.
Thanks so much, Beck. That was great. So
Stop
much good
sharing.
practical advice and amazing tips and tricks as well. Thank you. Next, we'll hand over to Amanda Kay. Amanda, if you'd like to load your presentation up, I'll introduce you. And we'll have time for questions for both Beck and Amanda at the end of Amanda's session. So Amanda Kay is director of T3D, Third Door Studios, and works as a multidisciplinary artist using modern and traditional techniques, working primarily on commissions to create site-specific artworks for public space with life partner Jerome Dobinson. Spatial relationships within their work create experiences between people and place, and they apply colour and design principles to space, endeavouring to establish synergy within our physical surrounds. Responding to the needs of the stakeholders, the local environment and new technologies, Amanda is inspired to create a more colourful environment for people to work, live and play. So I'll hand over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm just checking. Yeah, I can. So hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. And thank you, Beck. It was really nice to see your work. Yeah, so thank you. I was just going to walk everyone through a few different projects as case studies. I thought that was a good introduction into the different processes and the different programs that we use to enlarge work. It's a little bit different to the mural painting on site because a lot of our work needs to be done in studio and a lot of it needs to be corrected before we actually print and install. So that's your dimensions, your file sizes, make sure that you have bleed, all these things, because you can't actually change anything once it's printed. So I was going to bring you to the first case study. So this is for Longford District Police Station. So we did this during COVID. So I didn't actually get access to the building and I had to actually work off the wall dimensions that they gave us, so the architectural plans. So that's probably the best way to start doing any planning for your work, is to actually work off their plans, but never print from their plans. Always make sure that you get accurate site measurements. So if you can't get to site, then you need somebody to go out and actually take those wall-to-wall measurements for you. So this is actually printed on a vinyl, and I'm showing this case study because it is through photography. So this opportunity was to go through all the archives through Tasmanian Library. So they have all the records of all the Tasmanian police records. So this police station was amalgamating a lot of the local police stations and making it one large police station for the surrounding district. And when I looked through the history, this was actually happening and has been happening a lot. So I think once upon a time there was lots of outposts, and these outposts you needed to get by like horse. So there was quite a lot of them. So you could only be like one day ride away. So there was lots and lots of outposts, and obviously with transport all getting better, we've managed to amalgamate. So this history was actually really important. So we imbued that history. So we got all of the documents of the old police stations that have been built in the area, and we've used a lot of those plans, overlaid them. We've got some of the records in there as well. Anyway, it was a really fun experience to actually go through all the archives and actually photograph all these things and see all the beautiful handwriting that's been happening for, I don't know, a couple of 100 years these records are from. This is obviously a little bit larger, so you can actually see the work a little bit more. I also based it on a grid, which was basically the police station grid. So that is informing the work. It's not actually exactly how a police station stripe is or a police logo is, but anyway, it was just an inspiration. So this was the DDP. This was a one-page DDP. We normally have quite a lot more pages, but what I wanted to do was show how the work would look at actual size rather than trying to fit the full size work in. So that's the DDP. I would always recommend to work with your printers and find out what the file setup needs to be and start doing some sampling early on so that you can actually get your color output, and also just do all of those printing issues that might come up, just kind of get rid of all those bugs that might come up. Through this project, I also had to catalogue. So every image that I used needed a citation, and it also needed permission. So I ended up having to create a pretty extensive catalogue, which I ended up hand binding in the traditional hand binding techniques. So that was a really fun additional thing that I ended up having to do. So this project is probably the size and scale of one of the commissions or the call-outs that ArtsTas is inviting artists to apply for at the moment. So the second case study is more illustrative. So using Illustrator, we do a lot of hand illustrations, and then we convert them into a digital format, and then we do an illustration through using Illustrator as our program. We've also done a few layers here. So we've done a background which is using mathematical geometries, and then we've actually worked with the the science department. That was actually a really important part of this project. So we worked with the science department to get all the correct formulas and make sure that we were putting the right things on the wall. They were quite a bit of discrepancy with some of the formulas and the way things were written. We needed to be really specific so that we weren't actually giving incorrect information. So that was a process that kind of went back and forth a little bit. So this project had quite a few parts to it, but this front wall is probably about the same size wall that, again, would be for your call out or current call out or opportunity. We have added some additional elements because it was a science lab. We added these perspex slices, and they've been laser etched, and that is an additional cost. So I don't think that would probably fit into this budget. But anyway, it was just a nice thing to show everyone. So we also worked on the windows. These are actually a laser cut or cut out vinyl, and they're a really interesting treatment and a really cool way to work with windows and light. One thing you want to be careful with this kind of treatment is you want to be in an area where people aren't picking. It can pick off if you give it lots and lots of scratching. So you just want to make sure that it has a vandal that's part of the ArtsTas requirements. The other part to this commission was we did these 3-layer light boxes. So again, this probably wouldn't fit into the budget, but I just wanted to show how this commission, or what was actually part of this commission, it actually made the area, it was really quite dark in this corridor, so it was a really great opportunity to put light boxes. They had a 3-layer, 3 levels of printing of acrylic in the light boxes, and so they probably have a better effect when you're actually in person. You can't really see all those subtleties, but anyway, just to let you know that that's what was going on there. And I also to show you the converting the drawing into a digital and how that turns out. So that's what's on that page. Here is some of our DDP pages that we presented. They are in their embryonic stage, but quite resolved. So we show the work pretty much how we're going to print it, but we do get some feedback, and we also have a little bit of time before we send the files to print to make sure that everything's right. So these files would be probably 80 to 90% of what we would actually print. And it gives a bit of a background to the stakeholders to make sure that they understand the framework, how we've come to these ideas, what our inspiration was, and how it's all going to look, what the material is going to look like, what the colours are going to look like. So that's pretty much what's in our DDPs. So the next case study is, this was a private commission. This was outside of Tasmania. This was in a local bakery. This is a case study where I'm showing you more illustrative work. So this again was done by hand and then converted into digital and made into a large format mural that we printed, and we printed for both inside and outside. It's an interesting project. It's a little bit more comical, or a little bit more fun, and a little bit more irreverent. And it really captured the feeling that we think that Signet has. It kind of has an eclectic mix of people. And anyway, I really feel that that was a fun approach and a really great way, or a great execution of illustration in digital. So that's why I brought that to you guys today. We also extended the work into some of their branding, and because we had worked digitally, we were able to just quickly convert it into some colouring in pages. So we had colouring in, so when they opened, lots of the kids were kind of getting really inspired by the work, and that was a really great thing for the community. The last case study was for Launceston General Hospital. It was called Ward 4K. It's now called the Wombat Ward. And this is a larger commission, a much larger commission. But the reason why I wanted to show you this, because it actually has both window and wall graphics. Your budget, or the budget for the call out, is probably about maybe half that size surface area you'd get. It is with a continual drawing, so we've used one continual drawing. We haven't actually we've made one drawing and converted that digitally, and then coloured that, and then got it ready for printing. So it's a different technique to the previous projects that I've shown. Then we also did some wall prints. So we did a lot of windows, and we did these corridors, and it was quite fun. So this was designed for the older area, so the adolescents, where the other one was actually for the younger kids. So it was just again, something quite fun and much nicer in a clinical environment to have something fun and inspiring rather than just a blank white wall. So what I wanted to do is just tell you a few steps. It's basically really general information that I'm offering, because each project is unique. So anyway, I just thought I would give you an overview. So you need to apply for the commission, and when you apply for the commission, you provide a concept sketch, and you respond to the brief or the call out as best you can. Once you get the commission, then you get to rework your artwork. So you don't need to have a finished artwork when you apply. You've actually got 8 weeks to refine it. So we do a lot of work within that 8 weeks to make it ready for printing or presentation. And then once we've done all our sampling, and we've done our presentation, and we've got feedback, and we've had a look at our samples, then we'll go and make any little minor adjustments that we need to the colour or the sizes or some line work because it wasn't coming out the way that we wanted. We'll make all those adjustments, and then we'll prepare the files for print. So there are a couple of ways that you can prepare for printing. So if you guys don't actually have the skills, there's a quick and easy way to do it, and that would be to get the photographer to actually take a photo of your work, your finished work. So you've taken 2 months to do your beautiful artwork, then you take a photo of it, and he will stitch it together, or she will stitch it together, and then that will be able to be outputted at the correct output size for printing at that scale. So the other option would be to convert your line work into the vector file. And if you can't do that yourself, then you'll have to engage a designer and then they can scale that to any size without any loss of resolution. So if you don't have Illustrator skills, then it might be best to work on paper or canvas or whatever it is and get that photographed. So yeah, there's two ways that you can go about it. To get your print ready files, you need to speak to the printers because they have specific requests or requirements for their files. So as a general rule, they want the output to be 72 dpi. That's the minimum that they want, and you usually need 5 to 10 mil bleed around the edges. So they might actually cut that up. So if it's a large wall, let's say a 7 meter by 2 meter wall, you'll have drops, and what they'll do is they'll have a little overlap. So they can cut that up if you aren't confident in doing that. Yeah, if you're unable to create print ready files, hire a designer. You should have sorted through some of these details at the sampling stage anyway, so definitely get on board with your printer early, and then that can kind of, yeah, get rid of some of these little nits that happen when you're getting ready for printing. So again, this is just general information. So each project is different and unique and will require a different approach. Every single project I have shown you is different. Every site has been different. Every wall has been different. Every client has been different. So each time we approach a project, we think about what we want to achieve, and we think about the best way to achieve that. Each artwork is different and unique and may require a different approach, and that's pretty much how we do things in our studio. We don't seem to have a general rule. We do have it, we do have to look at everything and figure out how we're going to do it this time. So speak to your suppliers to discuss warranties and any technical requirements. So if you are printing on the wall, what you want to do is have the wall prepared, and that requires a paint that is a non-wash and wear. So if it has the wash and wear in it, it has the ability, so if you're wiping it, little flakes of paint come off. So you want it to actually have not that quality in there. So you want the non-wash and wear. So you can speak to your printers and they can recommend the correct paint for you. But you do need a coat of that on before you put the vinyl on. And you also need probably about 2 weeks before you put vinyl onto that wall. Otherwise the paint will degas. So there are some technical things that you'll need to work through with the supplier. Don't let others crop or resize your work. Get it right, or ensure you make the changes. So that was about if you give a file to someone, they might squish it and then it doesn't look the way that you wanted it to look, or they might have stretched it, and that again might change some of the dimensions. And you have spent a lot of time on getting something right on your composition, getting, you know, all of that technique down. You don't want it to get it wrecked in the last little bit by it getting squished. It's important to maintain your composition integrity. So yeah, please try and do what you can to get your work as your work. So if that's sitting with the printers or with the designer, if you don't have the skills to get your work out, then yeah, definitely make sure that you're there with them as they're doing any crops or things, just to make sure it doesn't get squished. It's definitely good to rework your work and get it right, because once it's installed, you can't fix it. So that is the sampling stage. That is making sure that your layout, you zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and make sure that all your lines and your dots and everything is connecting where you want them, because it does change. If you're working on a scale, if you're working on the computer, that scale is very, very different to 7 meters, or if you're working on paper or canvas, that again, that scale is very, very different to when you enlarge it. So yeah, make sure that you zoom in and really look at your details to make sure that is what you want it to look like when it gets enlarged. So if you haven't thought of it, allow the budget for the photographer or allow a budget for a designer. So both of those things are really important to make sure that when you get the commission, you are actually able to execute and convert whatever it is that you have made into a printable file. So the design development phase is 8 weeks, which is a really great time for you to actually get your work right. I keep saying that, but I think it's really important. It gets really stressful towards the end. You can't fix something. So if you have a mural, you could just go and you could fix it. This is really important, and there is a lot of nerves that might happen. So really set aside a couple of weeks to get that printing right before you press print and send. You also need approval from the stakeholders, but you would have got that before you started refining and doing your release files. I do recommend that you've got everything to probably about 80 to 90% because there are some changes. So you will need correct measurements. So you know how I was saying working off the architectural plans, you do work off them. If you if the site's not ready, for example, or you haven't been able to get to site, but definitely get measurements before you get everything ready for print. Samples are really important so you can check your colors and if your technique is translating into print. So yeah, make sure that you've done all of that in the design development phase. Work with the design team, so make sure you have a strong team. So trust your printer. Sampling is a good way of trusting your printer. Working with a photographer or working with a designer, that's really important. Work with your suppliers. These last two steps will allow you to work through your design to achieve the best results. So I think it's really important that you make sure you've got good communication, you allow lots of time, and you definitely do all this sampling before you do your final pressing of print. I think that was it. I just had a few more notes. So yeah, the programs were Illustrator and Photoshop, depending on how you're going to approach the commission. The solid walls, they definitely need paint preparation, so the non-wash and wear. Printers have specific file setup, so definitely contact them early, get a quote, get samples, work to the wall measurements, and you definitely need site measurements. Definitely don't send anything out until you have accurate sizes. The output, the minimum is 72 dpi at actual size, and you definitely need to add bleed. So that's probably it.
Thanks, Amanda. That was great. Really interesting to see all of the different ways that vinyl can be used as well. And, you know, you can have really different aesthetic kind of feels with it. And some really great practical advice in there as well. So thank you. Just a quick reminder for people before we go to questions for our two speakers. Applications for the wall space commissions are due on Monday, the 2nd of September. If you missed our first info session, which was a couple of weeks ago, that covered an overview of the Tasmanian Government Art Site Scheme, and it also went into the details of the wall space commissions. So if you missed that, I recommend that you watch the recording. It's on Arts Tasmania's YouTube page, and there's also a link to it on our website on the Wall Space Commissions page in the public art section of the website. This session is also being recorded. Apologies, I didn't mention that at the beginning. That's why your video and sound is off. And this session will also be made available online shortly. So we've got some time now for questions for our speakers, and we'll do that using the Q&A function, which is above your screen there. So you can type any questions you have in there.
There's a question for me. Do you want me to just answer that?
I'll jump in.
Oh, okay.
And Amanda, hi, it's Kate speaking. Amanda, could
Hi.
you just click the button to stop sharing your screen, if that's
Ah,
okay? Just
yeah.
next to the leave button.
Sorry.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks very much.
It's still not doing it.
It's
Okay.
working.
Yeah, there you go.
Great. Yeah, so there's a question for Amanda. Do you have any printers that you recommend?
I got the do you install the vinyl prints yourself?
Yeah, both for you. So if you want to
Mhm.
go with those.
Sorry, I
yeah.
haven't got both. There are some printers that I recommend. We really work with Think Big. They're probably the best relationship we've had. Just in terms with asking questions and getting things right and getting advice on the different surfaces or treatments or high quality vinyls. They're really good at suggesting that, because your products or the project needs to have a lifespan of 15 years. So you want to make sure that you have the highest quality vinyl. So if I'm going to recommend anyone, that's who I would recommend. I haven't really worked with many people beyond that recently, because I just trust the quality is going to be of the highest, and I want my work to last, and I don't want anything to come back to me. The other question was, do I install the vinyl print myself? And no, I definitely get that installed by the printers. So yeah, they will come out on site. Something 6 meters by 2 meters or 7 meters by 2 meters will take a day on the wall. They can, if it's not a flat surface and you want a flat surface, they can print onto a substrate and then install the substrate. But I would recommend printing straight onto the wall, because that's an additional cost.
Great. We also have a question here. Somebody's asking, I'd like to come and watch people paint live. Can I do that when painters are starting work? I don't know if that's something you'd be open to, Beck.
Yeah, sure. It really depends on the project. Like all of these projects we're talking about, every project is different. If someone's painting within a school, for example, then that would be a no generally, because going into a school site, you would need to ask for permissions and have a working with vulnerable people card and things like that. But if someone's working in public, then yeah. So it's really great to maybe even, get onto Instagram, find some local Tasmanian muralists and see what they're working on. You can pop down and say hello. Some people are more open to talking than others. I love to have a chat. So you're always welcome to come and see what I'm painting and have a chat with me. But yeah, you can always just check with the person who's painting as well, and sort of say, are you happy for me to just watch? Are you happy for me to take photos? Are you free for a chat? And they'll let you know as well. And another thing that you could do, as I mentioned in my talk, was go to a paint jam. So they run about 4 times a year in Blyden Copes Lane, and you'll see lots of different painting in different styles using different materials. And that's a great place even just to go and have a watch and have a chat with people.
Thanks, Beck. I've got another question for you. Do you have experience in abstract free painting, where the final work differs greatly to the proposed? If not, what would your advice be to abstract painters?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and that was something that's probably best to talk with the public arts officer about it. Generally, when you're doing a work, they want to see what's going to be very close to the final artwork. So if you work in an abstract way, I would suggest a bit like what Amanda was talking about, that creating your work separately and photographing it and then sharing that, and then painting something very similar. It would really depend on your commission, though. If you're doing a private commission, that would be discussing that in person with your client, and they may be really happy just to see your previous work that you've done and happy for you just to kind of go for it at the wall. But generally, my experience with the public arts commissions for Arts Tas is that it would need to be a little bit more structured than that, so that the stakeholders know what you're going to be creating and what the final output will look like.
Thanks, Beck. And yeah, I'll just add on to that briefly. Definitely at the initial application stage, you can give some examples of proposed concepts But if you are then selected for the commission, when it comes up to the design detailed package stage, you would need to finalise that design, and the client would expect that that would be the design that they'd receive, the end result on the wall. Do we have any other questions?
This is one for me about maintenance. So how long a public mural is expected to last, and have you ever been asked to come back and retouch your artwork, and do you need to factor that into budgets as well? That's a fantastic question. So the length of the artwork will actually be within the contract as well. Generally, it's about 15 years. So that may vary depending on the contract, but the ones that I have worked in the past have been to last for 15 years. There are ones that I have had to come and touch up. So one of the examples that I showed in my talk was for Kingston High School, where unfortunately someone backed their car into it. And even though it had the non-sacrificial coating, it still did scratch the artwork. So I went in and touched that up. In that particular case, that was all covered under the maintenance document. So when I created a maintenance document, it asks that the repairs be done by me first off, and I have all the list of all the colours of paint, so that if for some reason in the next 15 years I can't repair it, they know what colour paint and it can be repaired by someone else, but it requests that any repairs come to me, and that was paid separately. So that's not within the budget. That was paid for under insurance. So because it's an artwork and it's a real asset, it becomes part of the public art site scheme. So it's sort of essentially, I guess, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Alicia, but it's sort of artwork that is then owned by the Tasmanian government. And so they're really high value artworks and really important. And so I don't know if all of them are covered under insurance, but I assume that this particular one was. And so insurance actually covered me to come and repair that artwork. Is that all the bits? And yeah, in the budget. No, so in the budgets, I wouldn't put any maintenance in, but I do allow for my time to create the maintenance documents of how it needs to be maintained over time.
Thanks, Beck. That's a really good detailed answer. And yes, when artworks are completed, they're handed over to the department. So in this case, it would be the Department of Education, and the artworks go onto their asset register. So they are covered, and we would generally always contact the artist in the first instance if any repairs needed to be made, or if anything had changed on the site, if building works were coming up, anything like that might influence the artwork. Amanda, I've got a question for you. Is vinyl design printed on one layer?
Yes, it is printed on one layer. I forgot to say they actually print a protective layer on it as well. So the protective layer is on top to protect the inks and so that it can be cleaned. So that's really important for the longevity of the inks. So I think the only one that I showed you was Hellier College, and they were the light boxes and they had lots of layers. So that was a project where we had a larger budget and we could print and fabricate something that was more intricate and more detailed. So they're kind of like the slices of the scientific lab where you've got, your little microscopes and things. So we kind of played on that a little bit, and it has a bit of play when you are walking around the space. So the 3 layers was important for that element. But yeah, it's not necessarily a thing that you might be able to achieve within this budget. You probably want to print on the one layer. So if you are going to do anything in layers, it will flatten. And yeah, so the depth is on one layer.
Great, thank you. Okay, that looks like all of the questions. So
Alicia,
we might wrap.
Sorry, Alicia, could I
Sorry?
jump in? I think there was a question earlier on. I'm not sure whether it got answered around to Amanda. Which printers does she use? Did we answer that one?
Oh, I did answer that one.
Oh, you
So
did?
Yeah, the
Yep,
only
yep.
person I could suggest was Think Big,
Yeah.
because that's who I've been working with lately, and I know they do all of this high quality protective of the artwork, and they do it on the highest quality films, because it's part of the Arts Tas scheme. We want to make sure that everything has that 15-year lifespan. There was actually something I should say, and that is, if it's going to be in direct sunlight, that will degrade the ink. So you actually want to make sure that this is not going to be proposed for a north-facing window or a north-facing wall. So it will degrade quicker than if it was going to be on south-facing or not have direct sunlight. So that's important.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I just noticed there's a couple of hands up in the chat, so for people wanting to ask questions. If you do want to ask questions, can you pop it in the Q&A, just because we're recording, so we can't do live video for this one. So any more questions in the Q&A?
Okay. It doesn't look like we have any more questions coming through. So we might wrap it up. Thanks so much to Beck and Amanda. They were really great presentations and really valuable for our audience. And as I mentioned, this session, the recording of it will go up online on our YouTube account, as well as a link will be put onto the Wallspace public art page. So if you wanted to go back and have a look through any of those details again, that'll be made available for you. And thanks so much for your time, everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.